Welcome to this video on the topic of fractional operations. In this video we're going to go over two concepts. The first one being the terminology we use when we talk about fractions, and the second being the four arithmetic operations we can do with fractions, those being addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now first things first, let's have a look at the terminology. So in primary school, when you saw division, so consider A divided by B. When you saw this, you would have used this division symbol here. But as soon as you got to high school, your teacher said, don't use this symbol anymore, rather write everything as a fraction. So A divided by B is equal to A over B. Alright, now the two names we have when we're working with the fractions is the upstairs, or the top part of the fraction, we call that the numerator, and the bottom part, we call that the denominator. Now this terminology is really important to memorize because I'll be using it exclusively whenever we work with fractions in the future. So please make sure you memorize the numerator being the top and the denominator being the downstairs of a fraction. Alright, now that we've got the terminology out of the way, let's have a look at the operations. Now the first operation we'll look at is the simplest. We'll look at multiplication. Now consider we have two fractions, A over B multiplied by C over D, and we want to know what these two will equal when we multiply them. Now the first thing we do when we see multiplication of two fractions is we look at the denominators and we multiply them together. So we're going to go B times D. So I'll go B times D is BD, and that's all underneath the numerator. Now next step is looking at the numerators. We see A and a C, and we're going to multiply across. So A times C is simply AC. So that's our result there. That's how we do multiplication with fractions. Next one is we look at division. Consider we have the exact same fractions as before. We'll go A over B and C over D. Alright. Now, if we want to multiply these together, there's one more step involved. Before we do anything with the two, or anything together with the two fractions, we're going to work on this second fraction here. And what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this division symbol by flipping the fraction about. So we're going to get A over B, so we leave that unchanged, and then we're going to flip CD. So CD, flipping it about, is going to be D over C, and we're now working in times because we've flipped it. So our symbol becomes, alright, now that we're working in times, we know how to do that. We're simply going to multiply the denominators together and then multiply the numerators together. So it's going to become BC over AD. So notice how it's different between multiplication. So all we've done is we flip this second factor across, or we flip this second factor about and change the division symbol to a times symbol, and that gives us the result. Okay, now let's have a look at addition. Addition requires a few more steps than multiplication and division, but it's nothing we can't handle. Now, first step with addition, the first step in which we can apply to any fraction and we'll get the right result is we're going to look at our denominator and we're going to multiply the two together. So it will become B over D. That's our new denominator. Now we have to look at our numerator. We've got plus symbol here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the plus symbol there. And then I'm going to look at the numerator of the first fraction and the denominator of the second fraction, and I'm going to multiply these two together, and that will give me a D, and I'm going to put that on the left hand side of this plus that I've moved. Now next one is I'm going to look at my denominator of my first fraction and my numerator of my second fraction, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to multiply them together, and that will give me BC. So what we find is the addition of AB, or A over B plus C over D, is AD plus BC all over BD. So a few more steps involved there, but not too bad. Now let's look at subtraction. Now the good thing about subtraction is it's pretty much the same as addition, but the sign is different. So we'll go A over B, take C over D. And the way in which we're going to do this is same as addition. We're going to look at our two denominators, and we're going to say that that is now B over D, like so. Then I'm going to look at the symbol, and it's minus. So I'm going to get that minus, and I'm going to throw it up top here. Next step, look at the numerator of the first fraction, denominator of the second, and I'm going to multiply these two guys together. So that's going to become AD. Subsequently, I look at the denominator of the first fraction, numerator of the second, multiply them together, and then we get BC. So our final form becomes AD take BC all over BD. So notice how they're different, addition and subtraction. The only thing that changes is the symbol. So, in hindsight, what we set out to do in this video was we first wanted to review our terminology when working with fractions, and then we had a look at the 4 operations that we can apply when we're working with fractions. So, multiplication, division, addition, and then subtraction.